The fisherman thought he had rescued an ordinary little girl from the sea. But the moment she opened her eyes, she whispered 5 words that turned a simple rescue into one of the darkest criminal investigations the town had ever seen. The sea had always been predictable. Every morning before sunrise, Caleb Turner pushed his weathered fishing boat away from the old wooden dock, steering toward the deep waters off the coast of Grey Haven, a quiet fishing town where everyone knew everyone else's name. For 32 years, the ocean had been his livelihood. It had taken storms, nets, and even friends, but it had never surprised him. Until that morning. A thick blanket of mist floated across the water, swallowing the horizon. The world seemed unnaturally silent. Even the seagulls that usually circled above the harbor were nowhere to be seen. Caleb frowned. Something about the silence felt wrong. He slowed the engine and listened. At first, all he heard was the gentle slap of waves against the hull. Then, a faint sound. Not a bird. Not another boat. A cry. Soft, weak, almost impossible to hear. Caleb shut off the engine completely. The sound came again. A child's voice. Help! His heart skipped. He grabbed the binoculars hanging around his neck and scanned the endless gray water. Nothing but mist. Again. Help! This time it was closer. Caleb immediately untied the emergency life ring from the side of the boat and started rowing toward the sound. The mist slowly parted. About 50 yards away, something floated between the swells. It wasn't driftwood. It wasn't debris from another boat. It was a child. A little girl clung desperately to a cracked orange life ring, barely keeping her above the water. Every wave pushed her farther from it, and her tiny fingers looked too numb to hold on much longer. Oh Lord! Caleb threw himself into action. He maneuvered the boat beside her and reached over the edge. Take my hand. The girl barely moved. Her lips were blue. Her face was ghostly pale. She stared upward without blinking, as though she wasn't even sure another human being existed. Caleb stretched farther. I've got you, don't let go. For one terrifying second, another wave rolled over her head. She disappeared. Caleb dove into the freezing water without thinking. The cold hit him like a hammer, but adrenaline pushed him forward. His hand brushed against her soaked jacket. He grabbed hold and pulled her upward just as she slipped beneath the surface. Within moments, he lifted the tiny girl into the boat. She coughed violently, seawater pouring from her mouth before collapsing into unconsciousness. Caleb wrapped her in his heavy fishing coat and started the engine. The boat roared toward shore. His hands trembled on the wheel. Who was she? Where had she come from? There hadn't been any reports of missing children. No shipwrecks. No storms. Nothing. Yet here she was, alone, miles from land. 20 minutes later, Grey Haven Harbor erupted into chaos. Paramedics rushed toward the dock as Caleb carried the unconscious girl into the waiting ambulance. Sheriff Daniel Brooks arrived moments later. What happened? I found her floating offshore. Daniel looked stunned. Floating? Caleb nodded. By herself. The sheriff looked toward the ocean. That's impossible. The nearest shipping route was nearly 40 miles away. No passenger boats had passed overnight. There hadn't even been bad weather. Nothing explained how a little girl could have ended up there alive. The paramedics carefully placed an oxygen mask over her face. One checked her pulse. She's hypothermic, but she's fighting. Another frowned while examining her clothing. These aren't local. Everyone looked. The girl's clothes were expensive but badly worn, as though she'd been wearing them for weeks. There were strange symbols embroidered inside the collar. None of the medical staff recognized them. One paramedic gently brushed the wet hair away from her forehead. His expression changed instantly. Sheriff? Daniel stepped closer. What? The medic pointed toward the girl's wrist. Dark bruises circled both wrists. Old bruises. Not from the sea. Not from an accident. Someone had restrained her. The doc fell silent. Daniel's face hardened. This just became a criminal investigation. Grey Haven General Hospital sat on a hill overlooking the harbor. Within an hour, the emergency department was surrounded by police officers. News spread quickly through the small town. Nobody knew who the child was. Parents began calling schools. Families checked on their own children. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some believed pirates had abandoned her. Others whispered about smugglers. A few older fishermen quietly claimed the sea sometimes returned what people tried to hide. Caleb ignored them all. He remained seated outside the emergency room, unable to leave. He couldn't explain it. Something about the girl's terrified expression refused to leave his mind. She hadn't looked confused. She had looked hunted. Nearly 3 hours passed. Finally, Dr. Emily Carter emerged from the emergency room. She's stable. Caleb let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Can I see her? Emily hesitated. Just for a minute. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of heart monitors. The little girl looked impossibly small beneath the white blankets. And 4 rested in her arm. Her skin had regained a little color. Caleb quietly walked to the bedside. I'm glad you made it. For several seconds. Nothing. Then. The girl's fingers twitched. Her eyelids slowly opened. Fear instantly filled her eyes. She looked around wildly, breathing faster. No. No. It's okay, Caleb said softly. You're safe. She stared at him, studying his face, as though deciding whether she could trust him. Then she slowly reached for his hand. Her fingers were ice cold. She leaned closer, barely above a whisper. She spoke. They're coming? Caleb exchanged a confused glance with Dr. Carter. What do you mean? The little girl's frightened eyes shifted toward the hospital window. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Then she whispered 5 words that made everyone in the room freeze. They know you found me. The heart monitor suddenly began beeping faster. Outside the hospital, a black SUV slowly pulled into the parking lot. Its engine remained running. No one got out. The driver simply sat there, watching the hospital entrance. The words echoed through the hospital room long after the little girl stopped speaking. They know you found me. Caleb felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold ocean water still clinging to his clothes. Dr. Emily Carter knelt beside the bed, keeping her voice calm. Sweetheart, you're safe now. No one can hurt you here. The little girl slowly shook her head. You don't understand. Her breathing became uneven again. She stared toward the window as though expecting someone to appear outside at any second. Dr. Carter glanced at the heart monitor. Her pulse was climbing rapidly. We need to keep her calm. Caleb gently squeezed the girl's hand. My name is Caleb. I found you in the ocean. She looked at him for several long seconds. You shouldn't have. Those 4 words landed like a stone. Caleb frowned. What do you mean? They'll come for you now. Before anyone could ask another question, exhaustion overtook her. Her eyelids fluttered shut. Within seconds she had fallen into a deep sleep. The room became painfully quiet. Sheriff Daniel Brooks arrived only minutes later. Caleb repeated every word the girl had spoken. Daniel listened without interrupting. When Caleb finished, the sheriff walked to the window. Outside, the black SUV that had been sitting in the parking lot was gone. No license plate. No witnesses who had seen who was inside. Almost as if it had never been there. Daniel turned back toward Caleb. Did you recognize the vehicle? Caleb shook his head. No. Daniel sighed. We'll pull the hospital's security footage. His eyes drifted toward the sleeping girl. If someone really is looking for her. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Everyone understood. An hour later, 2 detectives from the State Bureau of Investigation arrived. Detective Laura Bennett was known for solving missing children's cases. Her partner, Marcus Hale, had spent nearly 20 years investigating organized crime. Neither believed in coincidences. Laura quietly entered the hospital room carrying a folder. Marcus remained outside speaking with Sheriff Brooks. Laura sat beside the bed. The little girl had awakened again. This time she looked calmer. Can you tell me your name? The girl hesitated. After several seconds she whispered, Anna. Laura smiled gently. That's a beautiful name. The little girl looked confused. I think. You think? I think my name is Anna. Laura exchanged a quick glance with Dr. Carter. You don't remember? The girl closed her eyes tightly. Images flashed through her mind. Dark rooms. Heavy footsteps. Locked doors. Cold water. Screaming. Nothing. She pressed both hands against her temples. It hurts. Laura immediately changed her approach. That's okay. You don't have to remember everything today. The girl slowly nodded. Back at the sheriff's office, Marcus Hale had already begun searching every missing child database in the country. He entered the girl's estimated age. Hair color. Eye color. Height. Wait. Nothing. He expanded the search. Still nothing. Laura joined him. Anything. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Not a single match. That's impossible. I know. Every missing child reported in the country appeared in the national system. Yet this girl didn't exist. Marcus frowned. It's like she was never reported missing. Laura folded her arms. Or someone made sure she wasn't. The room fell silent. That possibility was far worse. Late that afternoon, hospital staff carefully cleaned the girl's clothes. Inside the collar of her sweater, one of the nurses discovered something unusual. Tiny letters had been stitched beneath the fabric. Not a clothing brand. Not a child's name. A code. 17. The nurse immediately called Detective Bennett. Laura examined the stitching carefully. It was sewn in by hand. Marcus studied it. It looks intentional. Sheriff Brooks frowned. Maybe it's laundry identification. Laura slowly shook her head. No parent labels their child's clothes like this. Marcus looked thoughtful. I've seen codes like this before. Everyone turned toward him. He continued. Human trafficking investigations. The room went silent. Children rescued from trafficking rings were sometimes identified with numbers instead of names. Laura's stomach tightened. She looked toward the hospital room. Please tell me we're wrong. Marcus wished he could. That evening, Caleb finally returned home. His small cottage overlooked the harbor. Normally the sound of waves brought him peace. Tonight, every creak outside made him uneasy. He replayed the girl's words over and over. They know you found me. He checked every door. Locked. Every window. Locked. Finally he made himself a cup of coffee. As he sat beside the kitchen window, headlights swept across his yard. A vehicle had slowed in front of his house. Caleb stood. The black SUV. The same model he'd seen at the hospital. It stopped for only a few seconds, then drove away. No one got out. No one knocked. Simply watched. Caleb immediately called Sheriff Brooks. I think they're watching me. Back at Greyhaven General Hospital, the little girl awoke again just after midnight. The room was dark except for the soft glow of medical equipment. She quietly climbed out of bed. Barefoot she walked to the window, looking toward the harbor, toward the ocean. A nurse passing the room noticed her. Sweetheart, you should be resting. The little girl didn't answer. Instead, she whispered something so softly the nurse almost missed it. They're late. The nurse frowned. Who's late? The girl slowly pointed toward the parking lot. A moment later, every light in the hospital suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the building. Emergency alarms echoed through the halls. Doctors froze. Patients screamed. Backup generators failed to start. Inside the darkness, someone quietly opened the emergency exit door. And somewhere in the hospital, footsteps began moving toward the little girl's room. Darkness swallowed Greyhaven General Hospital. For several terrifying seconds, the only sounds were frightened voices, emergency alarms, and hurried footsteps echoing through the corridors. The backup generators should have started automatically. They didn't. Dr. Emily Carter reached for the emergency flashlight mounted beside the nurse's station. Nothing. Even the backup batteries had failed. This doesn't make any sense, she whispered. Hospitals were built with multiple emergency systems. For all of them to fail at once. Someone had planned it. Inside her room, the little girl never moved away from the window. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. Instead, she quietly whispered, "They're here." Outside the room, footsteps stopped. Whoever stood there didn't knock. The door handle slowly turned. Before it could open completely, a powerful flashlight beam flooded the hallway. Police. Sheriff Daniel Brooks' voice echoed through the corridor. The footsteps immediately retreated. Running. Fast. Daniel and two deputies raced after the shadow disappearing around the corner. By the time they reached the emergency exit, it slammed shut. Outside, only darkness, and the distant roar of a vehicle speeding away. 10 minutes later, electricity returned. Marcus Hale was already examining the hospital's security room. The technician looked pale. I don't understand. Marcus stared at the monitors. Every camera had gone black at exactly 11:47 p.m. Not 1 second before. Not 1 second after. Almost as though someone had flipped a switch. Can you recover the footage? The technician shook his head. It's gone. What do you mean gone? The recordings have been erased. Marcus frowned. Accidents don't erase files. The technician swallowed. This wasn't an accident. Laura Bennett entered the little girl's room carrying a warm blanket. The child was sitting quietly on the bed. She looked exhausted. Laura pulled up a chair. I need you to help us. The girl nodded slowly. Laura spoke gently. Who are they? Silence. The child stared at her hands. They were smiles. Laura frowned. What do you mean? They smile when other people are watching. Her voice became almost emotionless. But when the doors close. She stopped speaking. Tears filled her eyes. Laura didn't push further. Instead she asked, "Did they hurt you?" The little girl slowly nodded. Then she whispered, "They hurt lots of children." Laura felt her stomach tighten. The following morning, investigators searched the stretch of coastline where Caleb had found the child. Divers entered the water. Drones scanned the cliffs. Officers searched every inch of the shoreline. Nothing. No wreckage. No damaged boat. No clothing. No life jackets. No signs that another child had ever been there. It was as if the sea had delivered only one survivor, and erased every trace of where she came from. Grey Haven had always been known as a peaceful fishing town. Low crime. Friendly neighbors. Unlocked doors. Now, people were afraid. Parents walked their children to school. Businesses closed earlier than usual. Fishermen refused to sail before sunrise. Everyone felt the same thing. Someone dangerous had entered their town. That afternoon, Caleb received an unexpected visitor. An elderly fisherman named Walter Briggs knocked quietly on his front door. Walter had spent nearly 60 years working the Grey Haven coast. If anyone knew its history, it was him. Walter removed his cap before speaking. "I heard about the little girl." Caleb nodded. "So has everyone else." Walter hesitated. "I think you found her in the wrong place." Caleb frowned. "What does that mean?" Walter stepped inside. He lowered his voice. "There's a part of the sea old fishermen avoid." Caleb almost laughed. "You mean those ghost stories?" Walter didn't smile. "I'm talking about Blackwater Cove." The room suddenly felt colder. Blackwater Cove lay nearly 15 miles north of Grey Haven. The currents there were unpredictable. Fishing boats rarely entered. Several had disappeared over the decades. Official reports blamed storms. The older fishermen believed something else. Walter leaned closer. "For years, people have reported strange lights out there." "What kind of lights?" "Small boats. Always after midnight. They never use navigation lights. They come in. They leave before sunrise." Caleb folded his arms. "Smugglers?" Walter shrugged. "Maybe. But nobody has ever followed them." "Why not?" "Because the ones who tried." Walter looked toward the window. "Never came back." That evening, Caleb shared Walter's story with Sheriff Brooks and the detectives. Marcus immediately spread a nautical chart across the conference table. Blackwater Cove sat near an abandoned military supply route that had been closed decades earlier. Laura pointed to a nearby island. "No permanent residents." Sheriff Brooks added, "Just old warehouses." Marcus looked thoughtful. "Perfect place to hide something." Laura nodded. "Or someone." Meanwhile, Dr. Carter continued treating the little girl. Physically she was improving. Emotionally, she remained trapped in fear. She refused to sleep unless every curtain in the room remained closed. She flinched whenever footsteps approached. Most disturbing of all, she never asked to leave. Almost as though she believed nowhere was safe. That evening, Dr. Carter noticed the child staring at a map hanging on the hospital wall. "What are you looking at?" The little girl slowly raised one finger. She pointed toward the northern coastline. Exactly where Blackwater Cove was located. Dr. Carter's heart skipped. "Have you been there?" The child froze, realizing what she had done. She quickly lowered her hand. But it was too late. Laura Bennett had seen everything. She carefully unfolded another map and placed it on the bed. "There are hundreds of places here." She spoke softly. "You don't have to say anything. Just point." The little girl's trembling fingers slowly moved across the paper. Past Grey Haven. Past the harbor. Past the lighthouse. Until it stopped. On a tiny unnamed island just beyond Blackwater Cove. Laura stared at the map. "There isn't supposed to be anything there." The child looked directly into Laura's eyes. For the first time, her voice carried certainty instead of fear. "There is." Laura leaned forward. "What is there?" The girl's lips trembled. Then she whispered 6 words that sent silence through the room. "That's where they keep the others." No one spoke. Then Marcus Hale quietly folded the map. "We're going tonight." The operations room inside the Grey Haven Sheriff's office fell silent. No one questioned the little girl's words. "That's where they keep the others." Detective Laura Bennett slowly looked up from the map. "If she's telling the truth, every minute we waste gives them another chance to disappear." Marcus Hale nodded. "They already know we've found her." Sheriff Brooks folded his arms. "And if they're watching us, they'll expect a raid." "So we don't give them one," Marcus replied. Every eye turned toward him. "We go in quietly." Less than an hour later, a small Coast Guard patrol boat slipped away from Greyhaven Harbor without flashing lights. On board were Sheriff Brooks, Marcus Hale, Laura Bennett, 4 tactical officers, and Caleb Turner. The sea was unusually calm. Too calm. No one spoke. The only sound came from the engine pushing them toward the dark outline of the unnamed island. Caleb stood at the bow. The same uneasy feeling he had experienced the morning he found the little girl returned. It felt as though the ocean itself was warning them to turn back. Nearly 40 minutes later, the island emerged from the darkness. It was larger than anyone expected. Thick pine trees covered most of its shoreline. Near the eastern side stood an abandoned warehouse surrounded by rusted fencing. No lights. No movement. It looked deserted. Sheriff Brooks studied it through binoculars. Looks abandoned. Marcus didn't lower his own binoculars. No. What do you see? Tire tracks. Fresh ones. Leading from a small dock toward the warehouse. Someone had been there recently. The patrol boat drifted silently behind a rocky outcrop. The officers climbed ashore one by one. Marcus divided the team. Laura and 2 officers would approach from the north. Sheriff Brooks would cover the dock. Marcus, Caleb, and the remaining officers would enter through the warehouse. Everyone switched off their flashlights. The moon provided just enough light to navigate. Every snapped twig sounded deafening. They reached the warehouse. Its heavy steel doors were slightly open. Marcus carefully pushed one farther. The hinges groaned. Inside, nothing. Dust covered the concrete floor. Broken crates lay scattered everywhere. Old fishing nets hung from rusted hooks. Caleb looked around. This place has been empty for years. Marcus wasn't convinced. He crouched beside the floor. Fresh footprints. Dozens of them. Different sizes. Including very small ones. Children. Laura entered moments later. I found something. She pointed toward a row of wooden shelves. Behind them, a hidden metal door. Almost invisible beneath layers of peeling paint. Marcus tried the handle. Locked. One officer quietly used a hydraulic spreader. The lock snapped open. The door slowly creaked inward. A narrow staircase disappeared underground. Cold air rushed upward, along with a faint smell. Not seawater. Not mold. Bleach. Marcus exchanged a look with Laura. Someone had cleaned something recently. The tactical team descended carefully. At the bottom lay a long underground corridor. Concrete walls. Metal pipes. Electric wiring that looked surprisingly new. This wasn't part of the original warehouse, Sheriff Brooks whispered. No. Marcus shined his flashlight ahead. This was built later. Halfway down the corridor they discovered several rooms. The first was empty. The second contained shelves stacked with canned food and bottled water. The third made everyone stop. Tiny beds. 8 of them. Blankets neatly folded. Children's shoes lined against one wall. Small stuffed animals. Coloring books. A faded teddy bear missing one eye. Laura picked it up. It hasn't been abandoned long. One officer noticed something else. The beds were still warm. Marcus checked his watch. They left recently. At the far end of the room stood a bulletin board. Dozens of photographs had been pinned to it. Children. Different ages. Different backgrounds. Each photograph had a number written beneath it. Not names. Numbers. Marcus slowly removed one picture. The number read 17. Everyone froze. Laura immediately recognized it. The code inside her sweater. The little girl wasn't called Anna because that was her name. Someone had renamed her. She was simply 17. Before anyone could speak, a radio crackled. Sheriff Brooks answered quietly. Brooks? Static. Then the voice of the deputy guarding the hospital. Sheriff? His breathing sounded frantic. You need to come back. What happened? They're gone. Marcus looked up sharply. What do you mean gone? The little girl? Has disappeared. The words hit everyone like a wave. Laura grabbed the radio. Was she taken? We don't know. There was another power outage. When the lights came back, her room was empty. Caleb's heart pounded. No. Marcus immediately took charge. They used this place as a distraction. Laura looked confused. What? Marcus pointed around the underground rooms. They abandoned this compound before we arrived. They knew we'd come here. They wanted every available officer off the mainland. Realization spread across every face. The little girl had predicted they were coming. But she hadn't known. They had planned something much bigger. As the team hurried back toward the surface, Caleb stopped suddenly. He had heard something. A faint metallic sound, like a chain dragging across concrete. Everyone froze. The sound came again. From behind one of the storage walls. Marcus searched the area with his flashlight. There. A narrow crack between two shelves. The officers shoved the shelving aside. Hidden behind it was another steel door. This one had no handle. Only a keypad. Marcus examined it. It's electronic. Sheriff Brooks frowned. Can you open it? One of the officers connected a portable bypass device. The keypad flashed red, then green. A loud click echoed through the underground tunnel. The heavy door slowly swung inward. Beyond it, a narrow staircase descended even deeper underground. Unlike the first level, lights were still on below. Someone was there. Marcus quietly drew his weapon. So much for an abandoned warehouse. Caleb looked into the darkness. From somewhere below, he heard what sounded like a child crying. Then, the crying suddenly stopped. A man's voice echoed upward. Come, Cole. And unmistakably close. You're too late. The man's voice echoed through the underground passage. You're too late. For a brief second no one moved. Detective Marcus Hale tightened his grip on his flashlight. Police, he shouted. Come out with your hands where we can see them. Silence. Then, the lights below flickered once, twice, and went completely dark. Only the beams from the officers' flashlights pierced the darkness. Marcus turned to the tactical team. Stay together. Nobody separates. One by one they descended the narrow concrete staircase. Each step seemed to carry them farther away from the world above. At the bottom, the passage opened into an enormous underground compound. Everyone stopped in disbelief. This wasn't a simple hiding place. It was an entire facility. Long corridors stretched in every direction. Metal security doors lined the walls. Industrial ventilation systems hummed overhead. Rows of surveillance cameras hung from the ceiling. Some had been smashed. Others still blinked with tiny red lights. Sheriff Brooks whispered, "This place cost millions to build." Laura slowly looked around. No fishing operation could afford this. Marcus nodded. Someone powerful funded it. One of the tactical officers noticed fresh tire marks on the concrete floor. Vehicles. Marcus knelt beside them. Still damp. They left only minutes ago. The team followed the tracks through another corridor. The farther they walked, the stranger the compound became. One room contained dozens of computers. Every hard drive had been removed. Another room held stacks of forged passports from several countries. Some carried photographs of adults. Others, children. Different names. Different birthdays. Different identities. Laura stared at them. They weren't just hiding children. They were erasing them. Marcus quietly closed the cabinet. They were giving them new lives. Or making them disappear forever. Caleb wandered toward another room. Inside were children's drawings taped neatly across one wall. Houses, trees, dogs, families. Simple pictures every child might draw. But every drawing had one thing in common. In the corner, a black lighthouse stood beside the sea. The same lighthouse. Over and over again. Caleb frowned. Why would every child draw the same lighthouse? Laura looked closer. It must mean something. Suddenly one of the officers called out. I found another room. Everyone rushed toward him. The heavy steel door had been left slightly open. Inside, dozens of small beds. Some still unmade. Children's shoes scattered across the floor. Half-finished meals remained on tables. A toy train slowly rolled across the floor after being nudged by someone's boot. It felt as though everyone had fled only moments earlier. Sheriff Brooks checked one of the cups. The milk was still warm. They knew exactly when we were coming. Marcus looked toward the ceiling. Someone warned them. The realization hit everyone at once. The traffickers hadn't escaped because they were lucky. Someone inside the investigation had leaked the operation. There was a mole. Before anyone could speak, Laura noticed something lying beneath one of the beds. A small notebook. Its cover was faded blue. Inside, children had written messages. Some pages contained only drawings. Others contained names. One page stopped Laura cold. Read. If someone finds this, please tell my mother I never stopped looking for her. Another page simply read. We aren't allowed to cry anymore. Laura quietly closed the notebook. No one spoke. The room suddenly felt unbearably heavy. Marcus continued searching the compound. At the end of another corridor, he discovered a reinforced office. Unlike the others, this room had not been cleared. A computer still sat on the desk. Its screen was cracked but powered on. The hard drive had been removed, but one file remained open. It was a shipping schedule. Several departures had already been crossed out. One departure remained. Tonight. Midnight. Destination unknown. Marcus checked his watch. They had less than 2 hours. If they're following this schedule, he said, they're moving the remaining children tonight. Sheriff Brooks looked up sharply. Then they're not all here. No. They've already been moved. Just then Caleb noticed something odd. The sound of water. Not dripping. Flowing. He followed it through another narrow passage until he reached a massive steel door. When he pulled it open, his breath caught. Beyond it was an underground tunnel filled with seawater. A hidden canal. Large enough for boats. The tunnel stretched beneath the island and disappeared into darkness. Marcus stared in disbelief. So that's how they came and went without anyone seeing them. Small boats could enter from the open sea, unload inside the compound and leave again before sunrise. No radar. No harbor records. No witnesses. The entire operation had been hidden beneath the ocean. As the officers examined the tunnel, Laura's phone vibrated. It was Dr. Emily Carter. Laura answered immediately. Emily, have you found the little girl? Dr. Carter sounded shaken. No. But we found something else. What? The hospital security team recovered one damaged camera. Laura held her breath. It recorded someone entering her room just before the blackout. Did you identify him? There was a long silence. When Emily finally spoke, her voice trembled. I know him. Laura frowned. Who is it? He isn't a stranger. He's one of Greyhaven's most respected citizens. Laura's heart sank. Who? Dr. Carter whispered the name. Laura's face drained of color. She slowly lowered the phone. Marcus immediately knew something was wrong. What is it? Laura looked around at the entire team before answering. The person who entered the little girl's room was Mayor Richard Whitmore. The underground compound fell silent. No one wanted to believe it, because if the mayor was involved, then this conspiracy reached far beyond the island. It reached the very people the town had trusted most. Laura lowered her phone slowly. The man who entered the little girl's hospital room was Mayor Richard Whitmore. The underground compound fell silent. No one wanted to believe it. The man the entire town trusted had been hiding its darkest secret. Before anyone could speak, red emergency lights began flashing. An alarm echoed through the tunnels. Then the mayor's voice came through hidden speakers. You've already lost. The children are gone. Marcus looked toward the underground canal. No. He's buying time. A tactical officer came running. Boats? Everyone rushed to the tunnel. Far ahead, 3 speedboats sped toward the open sea. Marcus didn't hesitate. They're escaping. Within seconds, the officers launched 2 patrol boats into the water. The chase had begun. The boats raced through the narrow tunnel before bursting into the open ocean. Moonlight shimmered across the waves. Ahead, the 3 speedboats split in different directions. Marcus spotted children aboard one of them. There. Follow that boat. The engines roared. Waves crashed against the hulls. The traffickers pushed their boats to the limit. But they couldn't outrun the Coast Guard. One speedboat struck hidden rocks. It spun violently before stopping. Officers boarded immediately. Inside, 8 frightened children huddled together. Cold, terrified, but alive. Laura smiled with relief. We've got them. Meanwhile, Marcus continued chasing the final boat. At the wheel stood Mayor Whitmore. He raced toward the abandoned Blackwater lighthouse. When Marcus arrived, the mayor had already disappeared inside. The officers rushed up the narrow spiral staircase. At the top, the mayor stood beside the broken windows overlooking the sea. There was nowhere left to run. Sheriff Brooks stepped forward. It's over. The mayor gave a bitter smile. For years, people trusted the wrong man. They never asked questions. Laura stared at him. Those children trusted you. His expression turned cold. They were never supposed to survive. The room fell silent. Outside, police boats surrounded the lighthouse. Helicopters circled overhead. The mayor looked out one final time. His empire had fallen. Without another word, he slowly raised his hands. Sheriff Brooks placed him under arrest. Weeks later, Greyhaven finally began to heal. The hidden compound was sealed forever. Investigators identified more missing children. Families were reunited after years of heartbreak. The little girl slowly recovered. Her real name wasn't Anna. It was Lily Harper. She had disappeared nearly 2 years earlier. The day she reunited with her parents, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. One quiet morning, Caleb returned to the same beach where he had first found her. Lily stood beside him, watching the waves. "You saved my life," she said. Caleb smiled gently. "I only pulled you from the water." She shook her head. "No. You believed me." The ocean was peaceful once again. Its darkest secrets had finally surfaced. And one simple act of kindness had saved not just one little girl, but countless innocent lives.